Okay, good morning and welcome back. I think some of you over-partied last night, and I can see that some people can't walk very straight. And I've taken judicial notice of that. I'm just borrowing a few words from the lawyers. All right, a couple of housekeeping notes. At lunchtime, please, if you haven't requested for halal or vegetarian, please stay away from that because we had a little problem yesterday. But if you haven't also notified the staff that you need vegan or vegetarian or halal, please let them know so that they can increase the numbers. Okay, so to start off, you're going to sing the African American anthem. So we would like all of you to stand.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Okay, we're going to start off with some historical presentations. And first, the history of people of African descent in Saskatchewan. And they open up with a song, Lift Up Your Voice and Sing. So Carol Lafayette Boyd, Executive Director, Saskatchewan African Canadian Heritage Museum.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to your second day. I hope you'll be able to hear me because I've come down with some kind of virus I got from my great-grandniece who's at home crying for me. So I may have to step out in a while. So I'm here. I guess I'm a second-born generation Saskatchewan person of African descent. My grandfather came here in 1906, and his father came from Virginia in around 1870 to Iowa. So that's how we got here, but I'll explain some of that as we go along. What I found interesting is I started our family genealogy back in about 1984, and when I retired, I thought I could finish it, but something happens in retirement. People get hold of you, and you have less time when you're retired than you did when you were working. So, one of the people sitting in the front row is to blame for that, Christine Luonga. She snafu'd me, and I've been there ever since when I retired in 2005. So, but one of the things about genealogy is that you get to look at the census, and so I'm going to talk to you about some of the census in Saskatchewan. And what you have here is Saskatchewan wasn't a province until 1905, but there is census for the Northwest Territories. And at that time, in 1901, it shows 6 people in Saskatchewan of African descent. Now, when you look at the census, we were either called African, colored, or Negro. So I had to go and look up all 3 of those. And sometimes we weren't, we were just called from the US or from Ontario or something like that. But Manitoba at that time in 1901 had 70 people of African descent that were shown. Then in 1906, the first actual census of the province of Saskatchewan, it didn't show racial origin. So I found that very interesting. I think some of the other provinces did, but Saskatchewan didn't. Then in 1911, because of the influx of people coming in 1910 from Oklahoma, there was 307 in Saskatchewan, but there were 765 in Alberta. And my great-grandmother and my uncles and aunts were some of those. They had come in 1910 and showed that they were coming to Saskatchewan when they crossed the Manitoba border at Emerson. However, they actually went on to the settlement in Alberta. And I often wondered how my grandmother, my mother's mother, got in. She was the oldest of the family and didn't come with her mother because she was already married. And I thought she must have snuck across the border because in 1911, they had, the government had deemed unsuitable people of African descent because the weather was too cold for them, and tried to prevent them from coming in. So I assumed she snuck in, but I did find her in 1913 crossing through New York. So I said Alberta had 765, and that was a lot that had come in from the States. And BC showed 111 at that time. Then in 1916, Saskatchewan had 488 people of African descent. Alberta had 1,000, and Manitoba had 279. However, in 1916, my family was not listed as African. They were listed as French because our last name was Lafayette. So it's kind of difficult sometimes to determine really who's who in these census. But by 1921, it had become less, 336 in Saskatchewan. And I think that's because many had moved to Alberta, because there was 961 in Alberta, 645 in BC, and 435 in Manitoba. So most of us in Saskatchewan that were in Saskatchewan were from farming communities. And as things were not so good sometimes, they moved on to work on the railroad and usually had to live in Alberta or Manitoba. And in 1926, there were 288 in Saskatchewan, 820 in Alberta, and 315 in Manitoba. But they weren't really accurate because sometimes it was noted that they might have been Scotch or something like that. So, and here's an example of the census, and I believe this census, you can't really see it, but there is a, it says the Lindsays, and they came to Saskatchewan in 1899, and they came from the US. I didn't know all of this. Also, there were, in the last few years, there's 2 families that have come forward when they found out about our museum and said that their great-grandfathers were of African ancestry. They don't appear to have any African ancestry in them, and but they're starting, I guess, because of DNA and everything, to start to want to know that. So I did find those 2 families in the 1926 census, and they were married. Their spouse was Scotch, and they had come from the United States, so they were obviously married in the United States before they came here. And I did, when I was doing my Iowa census searches, there were a lot of intermarriage in Iowa, with mostly with black men with white women. Okay, in Saskatchewan, where we settled, it was in lots of places. There was up in Prince Albert, the Millers settled up there, and that's where many of you, who, especially you BC people, know of Harry Jerome. He was actually born in Prince Albert, but did spend most of his life in British Columbia. But we settled everywhere there in the province. So I'm going to explain to you why we started researching some of this. Our organization, Saskatchewan African Canadian Heritage Museum, was founded in 2002, and one of the founders, of course, was Christine Luonga, and our singer that was here, Pamela Brown. The first event was held in 2005 for the 100th anniversary of Saskatchewan, the becoming a province. Our mission is to preserve and celebrate the heritage of people of African ancestry in Saskatchewan. And we've had some projects that we have done. The book, I've got it back there, Little Shad, based on this recognition of Dr. Shad who came here. And that book is $15 if you're interested in buying it. It's a children's book. The honoring tree, that if some of you have been out to the Wascana Park and seen our honoring tree. It's part of the Living Legacy component of Saskatchewan's centennial celebration of the 1910 settlement of people of African ancestry in Saskatchewan in 2000. Well, that's supposed to be, yeah, that happened in 2010 at the 100 years. So the first person that we knew about, even though now I'm discovering there are other people here before Dr. Shad, was Dr. Alfred Schmitz. He was born in 1869 in Ontario, Canada. He came in there as a teacher. He returned to Ontario and got his medical degree and returned to Saskatchewan as a medical doctor. I haven't found it in any of the literature, but a story told to me by a person from Melfort was that when Dr. Shad arrived in Kinistino, they wouldn't let him treat people of European descent, but they did let him treat the First Nations people and the animals, so he was a veterinarian also. And what happened is a person of European descent became very ill. Dr. Shad saved his life. So Dr. Shad was quite an important person. He was a farmer, a veterinarian, a journalist, a politician, a pharmacist. And he died in 1915 in Winnipeg. And when he died, the funeral procession was 1 mile long with horse and buggies and a few Model Ts and people walking all the way from Melfort to the cemetery. This is the book, Little Shad, that was written about Little Shad's son, and it's based on a Kwanzaa principle. The honoring tree was put up in 2011, and it's out there for you to see. The other thing that we've done just last year, as the minister said yesterday, the Shiloh Baptist Church, it's near Maidstone, Saskatchewan. It's on the highway between North Battleford, Saskatchewan, and Lethbridge, Alberta. Not Lethbridge, I'm sorry, Lloydminster, Alberta. And so it's near Maidstone. It was built in 1911 and was last used in 1945. And in 1991, it was designated a municipal heritage property, and then just last year, it was designated a provincial heritage property. And we're going to put the plaque out there on August 3rd, and everyone is welcome to come to that, as we do that. So, though, in 1906, my family arrived, my grandfather Louis, his wife Helena, son Ernest, and his brother Goldie. And the other interesting thing that I found out about Goldie was that in I think it's the 1916 census, he was listed as Scotch also, somewhere living on a farm. Louis had apparently, our story they tell us is that my grandfather had sent money for property here in Regina, but when he arrived, nobody reported receiving the money. And he lived on Winnipeg Street North, and he used to tell his grandchildren every time he passed by there about where he lived. And then in 1910, my great-grandmother, Texana, and her husband, Edward, arrived, and they went on to Alberta. So that's kind of the history that I know about, but we're still finding out more. And our goal is to recognize the contribution of people of African descent. So on our website, we do have people that have come since that time. And I guess I'm supposed to get questions after, so I'll pass it over to you and see who is next, okay? Thanks.